Today, we got to talk about why NFL passing numbers are down in the first couple weeks of the 2024 season, and I'm going to give you my reasons as to why it's happening on this edition of Shumake Take Rants. Let's go. What the heck was that? Well, well, that's an unconventional way to start the show. I don't know what the heck made that noise, but you know what? We gotta roll with it. all right, and welcome in, everybody. Hope you're having a fantastic, fantabulous, awesome freaking day, man. My name is Garrett Shumake, and you are listening to Shumake Take Rants. This is Shumake Take Rants number 9, and today we got to talk about the NFL right now having down passing numbers. Yes, down passing numbers. That makes perfect sense. That's great sentence structure, Garrett. But NFL passing numbers in general over these first couple of weeks are down, and we got to figure out why. We got to talk about why, and it's pretty interesting once you get into the weeds about it. And again, I apologize for the sound that you heard over there. I don't know what the heck it was. Actually, I do know what it is. Check it out. It's a Tennessee state flag license plate. I thought my vehicle, I drive a truck. I thought it had a license plate thing on the front, and it doesn't. So I spent $10 on this license plate for it to just sit here in my room for right now. And I think I may have broke it. It's kind of bending in an awkward way. I hope I didn't. Nothing. There's no cracks or nothing. But yeah, we should be fine. I think it's going to be okay. But NFL passing numbers. Like I said, they are down these first couple of weeks, and it's kind of staggering when you really think about it. Here's some observations and some statistics I was able to find online. I don't have a complete list of statistics, showing week 1, week 2, and combining them together. Simply put, I don't have access to certain stuff like, AWS, Amazon Web Services, Pro Football Focus. I don't got access to all the stats and where you can all find this stuff. So I've pretty much found everything I have here from social media and just from people posting it and graphics and whatnot. So it's not going to be complete. So if you're looking for data, that's not going to be this type of video. We don't got data. We don't got stats today. We have some, but not a whole lot. But just some simple observations that I made, or not that I made, that I found that looking back, yeah, that makes sense. 2019, passing touchdowns in NFL Week 1, 61. 2024 was 34 or 35 if I'm correct, remembering this correctly. And so here's the thing. That's literally that's practically just about roughly a 50% decrease over the past 5 years. What is that? Yeah, 5 years. Technically this is the 6th year, but I feel a sneeze going on. Whew. Man, that's a pretty powerful sneeze. I might have to turn that down. Man, this show is starting off pretty darn interesting, if I do say so myself. But here's the thing. The numbers are down almost roughly 50%, give or take. That's pretty crazy. Pass percentage in week 1 over the past 6 years. So pass percentage pretty much means how many percent of plays that are pass attempts for the offense. 2019 it was 63.8%. It's down to 60.3, so it's roughly 3% decrease. And some other statistics that I was able to find. In week 1, only 2 quarterbacks threw for over 300 yards. Week 1, 73 field goals were made, which is the most of any week in NFL history. Pretty insane, right? And then in week 1, there were 35 passing touchdowns, like I said, and there was 36 rushing touchdowns in week 1. Rushing touchdowns surpassed passing touchdowns. That's a sentence. But yeah, that's a thing. That happened. And also in week 1, 7 running backs had reached over 100 yards in week 1, which is the most since 2014, where 8 running backs did it in that year. Another crazy stat. And also in week 2, in total, there were 136 touchdowns combined, and then there was 141 field goals. Now, take that information for what you will, because field goals, I don't know if that stat also includes extra points. I don't think it does, because that's kind of, the terminology is obviously different. Field goal, extra point, 3 point, 1 point, whatever. But let's just say that it is field goals, 3 point field goals, not extra points. If that's the case, truly, then that's pretty insane. But here's the thing. Why? The big question is why? Why are all these passing numbers down? Why are there so many more field goals and touchdowns? Why is all of this happening? Well, this is actually pretty interesting to me because opinionated, like, I have a list here with, like, they're all kind of opinions, but they're all valid reasons, I guess. But mostly opinionated. I had thoughts about this years ago in 2019, 2020 season, because that was really when NFL passing offenses became more schemy and prevalent. Like, that was the dominant form of winning football, was passing and taking deep shots down the field. And I had said it, like, talking to my friends and whatnot, that there's going to be a point where passing is going to become better and better and better and more dominant and more necessary. And it's going to get to a point where NFL defenses adapt. They're going to catch up. They're going to figure things out. And eventually, we're going to see a running back renaissance. And I'm not here to say that this is going to go on the whole season, but right now, we're definitely in a freaking running back renaissance right now. And it's safe to say that NFL defenses, they might have caught up. They might have finally caught up with the trend, I don't know why I'm saying finally caught up, because defenses are normally ahead of the offense. Well, that's more like week one type of stuff. I'll get to that later on in the show. But defenses have finally figured it out. They finally figured out what the right way is to play against these passing offenses that are taking these shots down the field. And they now have changed their formations, they've changed the scheme, and so now it's more advantageous to run short passes and to run the ball. And like I said, I figured that it would get to this point eventually, but just to see that it's here is still kind of surprising. It's like one of those things, like, you can prepare for it and you can expect it, but you can't really understand it and understand how you're going to feel about it until it hits you in the face. And now that it's hit me and, hit y'all in the face, it's interesting. It's very interesting because we've gotten so used to the NFL offense now being pass heavy, and now we're seeing a lot more teams run the football. We're seeing a lot more success running the football. And so it's different. It's interesting. It's different. It's fun. It's nice that running backs are getting a lot of love right now. And honestly, last year, they really didn't make their case well enough for running backs to be paid as much as they probably should be, depending on your stance on that argument. But this year, over these first couple of weeks, they're making the statement that they should. Because right now, running the ball is more valuable than it has been probably in a long time. And I know it's only a couple weeks. Things could probably shake up here in the next 2 weeks and things will kind of balance themselves out back to normal. That's much of a possibility. But it's also much of a possibility that this type of trend carries over until like the first half of the season or so. Shoot, it could probably carry on throughout the entire season if the NFL teams let it. And so this is something that people have picked up on and people are talking about. But we have to really get into why. And I have, let's see on this list, 13, technically 14 reasons here of why. So it's kind of going to have a little bit of length to it. Not much. They're not super, like, detailed. I shouldn't say there are 14 reasons. There's a couple, like, one reason, like, the next two tidbits are, like, adding on to it. So I shouldn't say that. But there's a solid handful of reasons. And when I was coming up with this list, the first one that came to mind was the lack of starters playing in the preseason. Compared to maybe 10 years ago, not even 10 years ago, 5 years ago. We saw starters playing in the preseason a lot. There was 4 preseason games, and it was more important to get the reps in for your players, for your starters, so they can get used to live reps. Because no matter how much you practice in the training facility, nothing can simulate live reps than actually playing football against another opponent. And part of the reason why players or starters have not played as much, first off, is because of health. teams now, have spent more money on investment, spent more money and invested into their players more than ever. So to keep them healthy, they don't play them in the preseason. That's why, a lot of the NFL's highest paid players don't play. It's because the NFL or the teams have spent a lot of money on these players, and they don't want to risk them getting injury in a preseason game. In a game that's not going to count towards the regular season, that it's not going to help them towards getting to the playoffs. And along with that, with the NFL taking away the third preseason game in favor of adding a 17th game a few years ago, the backups on the roster or the players that are just trying to make it, that's one opportunity taken away from them to show that they deserve a spot on the 53-man roster. And with that being said, less starters have to play because you kind of have to let these backups and let these third stringers, fourth stringers play a lot more so they can get a more fair evaluation. And those two things right there creates slower starts on offense once the regular season hits. Think about the Cincinnati Bengals, for example. They don't really play their starters in the preseason, and look what happens. Their offense starts out slow. Their defense makes a little bit of mistakes here and there. And not playing football in the preseason does play a role. It plays a factor. The Cincinnati Bengals is one example, but there's many examples in the NFL of teams starting off slow because they're simply not playing their starters. And what happens here is when you have a slower start, you have to ease into it. You can't just go from not playing football to playing at your absolute best in the first few weeks of the season. And this isn't relative because NFL offenses start off slower, or teams start off slower in general, but specifically on offense, I've heard a couple coaches talk about it over the years, but those first 4 weeks or so, you're still easing into the season. You're still catching up. You're getting back to game speed. And not to mention, you haven't played any opponents that much. The game film you have on your opponent in week 15 compared to weeks 1 through 4, the sample size is nowhere near it. Of course, the sample size in reality for like a team going up against an opponent in week 4 is still absolutely massive, but it's nothing massive compared to the amount of film you have in week 15. So offenses tend to focus on executing what they do best rather than how to beat their opponent. Now, of course, it's always NFL teams every week from week 1 to 18, always, okay, here's what we do best, here's how we're going to execute it, and here's what our opponent does best, how are we going to minimize that, and how are we going to win this game. Like, it's still going to be both. Like, it's not never one or the other or whatnot, but NFL teams, because there's a little bit lack of film against an opponent, their job is more of, okay, what do we think we do well? What are we going to do best? It's more simplified, I guess. I don't know how to exactly explain it. I'm explaining it honestly the best I can. And like I said, it's not because let me think. Like I said, there's not enough of a sample size. And focusing on what you do best all throughout training camp, I guess right now at that point in time, you still have a little bit more of a sample size of that because that's what you've been doing all camp, all training camp, all off season. So you're familiar with it. So you're going to focus on what you're familiar with. And then once you get on later into the season, then you'll figure out, okay, I have more evidence and more film on my opponent. I have more film on us and what we do well, what we don't do well. And so as the season goes on, pretty much the sample size of what you do and what your opponent does just gets bigger, and so everything gets a little bit more complex. And as you really start getting into the weeds of play calling and game planning and preparation, the more the season goes on, the more complex it gets. So at the beginning of the year, it's not as complex. So what do? You focus on what you did all training camp and all off season, what you did the whole freaking time. That makes sense. And another reason for slow starts is because there's a relative inexperience at quarterback that we haven't seen in a long time. Right now, if I did my math correctly, there's 14 starting quarterbacks. Now, there is an asterisk there because Bryce Young just got benched. But over these first 2 weeks, 14 starting quarterbacks in the NFL, which is 2 away from being 16, which is half of the entire league. So 14. So almost 50%. these quarterbacks are either within their rookie year, go engaging all the way from first, second, third, fourth, fifth year. So that's almost half the league with at most 5 years experience in the NFL. That's a very big number for starting quarterbacks. And adding on to that, 9 quarterbacks are within years 6 to 7. I think I may have put 8 in there too. But even then, there's only 3 to 4 or 5 quarterbacks that are within 10 plus years in the NFL. So in general, there's a lot more inexperience at the quarterback position than I think we've seen in a long time. There's been a huge infusion of youth at quarterback. Now that, it's imperative that you have a young, talented, intangible franchise quarterback to win you games, that's how you win a Super Bowl now. And so when Patrick Mahomes was drafted and he won a Super Bowl, and, quarterbacks like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson were drafted and saw their success, it's clear and obvious now that if you do not have a young, talented quarterback that has intangible or has the intangibles, you're not going to win a Super Bowl. It's simply proven. And it's kind of sad in that way because the way to win it, the formula to win a Super Bowl is now more narrowed than it ever has been. That might be a different rant for another day. But 14 quarterbacks starting in the NFL within their first 5 years of experience, that's a very high number. And that adds to a slower start because there's not as much to go with. Quarterbacks that are in year 10 plus probably aren't going to start off as slow. Now, of course, you have your outliers. Like, obviously, week 1, Aaron Rodgers threw for like 160 yards, for example. So, but likewise, Matthew Stafford in week 1 threw for over 300. So, there's your, there's sense makers like, okay, this makes sense. And you have your outliers where it's like, okay, this happens. But that inexperience relative is something to not be understated. Along with that, passing, obviously the NFL has become a passing league. It's become so much prevalent, it's become so much emphasis that defenses are starting to adjust, and you're starting to see the results of NFL defenses selling out to stop the deep pass and stop the deep throw. And you can see it in how defensive philosophy begins to change. First off, linebackers. Linebackers is a big one. Linebackers back 10 years ago, they were kind of just, your run stuffers and, they were kind of like the quarterback of the defense. They still are. But now the emphasis is put much more on athletes. Maybe not the smart guys. Of course, all linebackers are smart. I'm not saying linebackers aren't smart, but you're trying to find guys that are absolute dogs, that are absolute big men, athletes that can run fast. Not only they can run fast, horizontal and vertically, but it can also run sideline to sideline. And along with that, you can coach them up to be able to play in pass coverage. Their athleticism will help them in pass coverage and be better pass coverage linebackers compared to, the typical linebacker 10 years ago. And along with that, like I said, sideline to sideline speed, which can help attacks from the perimeter, which is, your outside, the sideline, which is your sideline to sideline. Some people call it the perimeter. And along with that, you have these athletic linebackers that can help blitz, that can get downhill super quick. You have your defensive lineman create a gap, linebacker runs straight through it at full speed, and it creates a lot of pressure on the quarterback. So having more athletic and quicker linebackers have contributed to this, changing philosophy of passing the ball downfield. And along with that, we've seen dual threat running backs become more prevalent. Think about what Detroit did with drafting Jahmyr Gibbs, why they drafted him so high. When San Francisco traded for Christian McCaffrey, and then the Eagles recently signing Saquon Barkley. And, because the NFL is all about passing the ball downfield, you got to have a reason to create those opportunities. And having a good running back in the backfield that can not only catch, that can catch a pass in the flat and make a man miss and run for some yards upfield, but also just a running back they can hand the ball off to a little bit at least, and churn good yards and be efficient at bare minimum. Pretty much the idea is, okay, if you have a good running back, defenses are gonna have to respect it, and in turn, That creates more opportunities downfield. If you do not have a good running game, you're not going to be able to throw the ball downfield because teams are just going to expect it. And teams aren't going to have to respect the running game. They can send 4 instead of having to send multiple in the box to stop a running back because they're explosive. And that's not to say that's always been like that. That's always been like that in the NFL from ever since the forward pass was invented. That's kind of how it works. If you're good at one thing, defenses are going to sell it to stop it, and it's going to create opportunities for something else to come in and be productive. But the thing is, it's gotten on such of a scale where when you think about the best offenses in the NFL, they have these dynamic, explosive running backs that can do all these things out of the backfield. And those are the teams that tend to be the best deep passing teams in the NFL. There's a correlation there. And it makes sense because if you have a running back in the backfield that defenses have to respect, it simply creates more opportunities downfield. And likewise, if you're throwing the ball downfield a whole ton, it's going to create more opportunities for a running back to get carries and get yards. And that's the whole thing with NFL coaches talk about is having a balanced offense. And that right there is exactly what a balanced offense is about. Being able to run the ball effectively enough just to create deep shots downfield, and then take enough deep shots downfield to where it creates more opportunity for your running backs to get yards. That's literally the entire idea of a balanced offense. That's nothing new, that's nothing breaking, but how it's evolved and how the passing game has evolved and how the balanced offense revolves around that, it's changed a little bit. It's a little bit different. And the best way I can describe exactly schematically what defenses are doing, because I wanted to explain it because I don't really get much opportunities to really show my football knowledge, but I want to. I could explain it verbally, but I want you guys to really visualize and understand what I'm talking about. So for this next segment, we're going to talk about schematics, and we're going to talk about on the field what exactly defenses are doing to stop the passing attack and prevent it down and prevent deep throws from going over the top of their head and whatnot. So I'm going to go to the PC, and this next segment, I'm going to be drawing stuff on Microsoft Paint so you guys can get a visual as to what exactly schematically defenses are doing to stop the pass. So let's go to the PC and let's go. Let's go, I guess. I haven't done this in a while. Let's do it. Alrighty, and now we are at the PC. Kind of going to show you guys schematically how NFL defenses are stopping the pass. Let me add a couple safeties here. Yeah, those are safeties. I can tell. Here's the offensive line. Got your center, guards, tackles. Here's a tight end, quarterback, running back, and you got wide receiver 1, 2, 3. You got corners, your safeties, of course, defensive line, and linebackers. I know this is a great draw up right here. But here's the thing. Defenses are selling out to stop the pass and let plays from going over their head. Like so, you got your posts, your verticals, and then your deep corner routes, whatnot. That's what the NFL defenses are trying to stop. So what they're forcing offenses to do is run, the quick game. Simple stuff like slants. Well, that's an in route, but, a slant. That's not a slant. Jesus Christ. A slant. There you go. But that also applies in routes. Your little button hooks, you got your little curl routes, or you run a comebacker, stuff like that. Those short intermediate routes that keep plays in front of the defense are what defenses want to do. Because here's the thing. If you force the offense to, make a play here, make a play there, make a play back here in the backfield, right? This forces the offense to have to work down the field and make scoring a chore. And from the defensive perspective, the longer you're on the field, the longer the offense is on the field, that's another increased chance to create a turnover, a sack, a tackle for loss, or another, momentum-shifting play that can go in the defense's favor. So why exactly are defenses, stopping the pass? Why are they doing it so well? Well, here's the thing. Let's take these two safeties for a second. They're sitting right here. Quarterback's reading them. Okay, it's cover 2, whatever. Because real quick, if you don't know, cover 2 is because there's 2 safeties sitting back here. That's why it's called cover 2, because 2 people are covering the deep field. But anyways, make sure this is working. Okay. So instead of them being, let's say, like right here and right here, post-snap, they're going to go even further back. They're going to kind of go back here, for example. I don't got much space to work with, but you get the idea. And literally just take the free safety, strong safety, and just send them back there deep. And, that way there's people back. So when this guy's running a vertical, maybe running with his man, drag him to this corner, 2 guys, boom, lock it down. Then you have maybe a wide receiver here running a deep post or a corner route. Defense running with them. Likewise here, got a secondary, got a safety to go over here and kind of stop it. I'm drawing really good stuff right now, but this is like a basic understanding of what exactly they're doing. And this kind of too high look really showed up about a few years ago and became more prevalent. And over the past few years, it's increased a lot. But another thing is that defenses disguise more than ever, at least in my opinion. And the thing with disguising a defense, let's look at this right here. Defenses have always disguised what they look like. That's always been a thing, and it always will continue to be. But especially with the relative QB inexperience in the NFL at this point in time, it's a lot more prevalent. And just an example of what a disguise is. So I just realized that needs to go over here. Yeah, we're good. Okay, so as I was saying, disguise. So when you look at this right now, this is a common formation, cover 2 defense, pretty simple. And right now it looks like man on man. You have man right here. Maybe this linebacker is, right here. Let's say this guy, he's got the running back right here. And let's say this linebacker is blitzing this gap right here. For example, so you got coverage all on all fronts, just going to be man on man. But when the ball is snapped, let's say these corners on the outside, they go back and they go right here. This defense that looked like man immediately becomes what's known as quarters coverage, because you see each player's covering 1/4 of the field. So that's one example of how they're performing coverages. And what this does is, okay, as a receiver, you might have an opportunity to beat your man right here, kind of get in the middle, lure the safety down, and then cut back outside. Well, in reality, if that's your route and this defensive player goes and sits in zone, this linebacker might come over here and block it, and then he gets open around the corner, and look, there's 2 players right there ready to stop it. So that's one example. Another example that can be done is, let's say the ball is snapped and it looks like, let me erase these for a second. Let's say this middle linebacker right here is right here. So he's lined up, ready to attack the offensive line. Looks like he's coming in on blitz. Let's say all the linebackers are like this. Let's say they're blitzing these gaps right here. And when the ball is snapped, they drop off into coverage. They drop off here, and then the middle linebacker, say a Fred Warner or Roquan Smith, guys that are super athletic, they'll drop back into here with the safety. And then boom, out of nowhere, you go from a cover 2 front in disguise, and it's actually a cover 3 approach. So stuff like your posts and your deep in routes, stuff like this has a lot more stuff on the back end. And potentially, these corners, they'll probably have sitting their zone over here. And this one usually slot can be on man. Sometimes they might sit back and this safety might go over here, and then boom, you have another iteration of cover 4. Right? So you have that type of jazz. And let's redraw our linebackers right here. So that's just the different things that defenses are doing to pretty much stop the deep pass and stop the throw from going over the top of their head. And along with that, defenses tend to be ahead of the offense. Because simply put, there's only a certain amount of variation between you can do man and zone. There's a limited amount of what you can ultimately do. I'm not saying it's not complex at all, but compared to the offense, it's not as complex. Because the NFL offense now, there's a lot more schemey, there's a lot more designed plays, and there's a lot more complexion in general. Starting with formations in general. Obviously on defense, you can have 4 defensive linemen and 3 linebackers here. Likewise, you can have, 3 defensive linemen, 4 linebackers, whatnot. Then you have nickel, where you have, more defensive backs on the field. and so on and so forth. So, you have your differences. And obviously, in the offense right there that you saw with wide receiver here, here, and here, that's called 13 personnel. Why it's called 13 personnel, I'm not entirely sure. But then you have an offense where you have your offensive line, here's a tight end, and here's another tight end, and you have 2 outside receivers. That's called 12 personnel. The formation stuff, that's normal, that's varied, and obviously a very common one, you have receiver here, and receiver here, known as bunch, obviously because they're bunched together. But it's the scheming plays. It's the schemed up plays where it plays a factor. So, like, in a normal NFL play, let me just draw my receivers again. Get them right here. Normally, like, let's run, like, a dagger concept. Where this receiver is going to run, like, a vertical, or maybe, like, a corner, or a post, or a corner. And this receiver is going to run out here and run in deep in route. So the idea here, like on a quarterback, okay, read the field. What are the defenses doing? And, wait for the right guy to come open, and make the right decision. It's all about reading the field and making the right throw. Compared to schemes or more schemed up plays where it goes into a specific spot. Here's an example. I talked about it in episode 13 when I was talking about Will Levis and the Titans. As an example, there's a play that he missed where you have 2 receivers running right here, and you have 2 corners right here. And let me erase this corner for a second. And the idea of this play was that they're going to run up and block right here, and the running back is going to swing out here to the flat. Quarterback throws it to him, and the idea is to get to the sideline and run up, and here's a touchdown. Right? That was kind of what I was explaining on that video. And then you have your stuff like that. And then you have your run-pass options, which are pretty much, okay, the running backs, let's say it's a dive up the middle right here. And the quarterback, as the running back gets right here to hand it off, this receiver is probably going to run a slant route, for example. In quick time, the quarterback has to decide, okay, am I going to hand this off right here, or am I going to throw it to this guy running a slant route? That's another example. And then, obviously, you have your stuff. I just lost my train of thought. You kind of just have, like, or for example, like a screen pass. Like a screen, obviously running out here. That's a thing. Maybe like a bubble screen. Maybe like this, this receiver, kind of run and block. And maybe like the tight end's over here, kind of block that. And the receiver runs a bubble screen out here in space and try and get to the sideline. Schemed up plays, that's where like the variation, more complexion of the offense comes in. Because there's a whole bunch of different things you can do with the different formations, how you move players. And as I said, there's a lot of stuff where defenses are ahead. And even though they're not as complex, because they're not as complex, it gives them an advantage because, like I said, there's only a number amount of ways where you can run man and zone and whatnot. And the idea is for the defense to adapt to the offense. And simply put, because there's not as much to learn, there's not as much to grab, inherently, they have an advantage. It's simply just an information standpoint. But this is a pretty much simple explanation is schematically as to how defenses are stopping the passing attack. And I think I did a good enough job explaining it. But we got to conclude the video, so back to the desk right now. All right, and we are back to the desk. And I hope that made sense. I'm pretty sure it did. I thought I did a pretty good job of explaining stuff. And it goes to show how, like, all the different stuff that offenses and defenses do. And what I showed was kind of just on a surface level. It can get not only a little, it can get a whole lot deeper than that. Especially when you think about preparation and watching film and whatnot. And in terms of film content, I would love to do film content. I enjoy watching film. Of course, I don't get to do it very often, and I don't have access to just game film myself that I can analyze. It's usually just watching someone else do film analysis, if I'm being honest with you. But maybe during the off season, if the Shumake take grows a little bit and it's successful and I can get a good following, I would love to do some film content. That'd be a lot of fun to do, especially over the off season, evaluating some of the league's top players. Water's good. But overall, I mean, I hope that was a pretty simple explanation as to what's going on with the NFL. And like I said, those are just some examples. That's not everything that defenses and offenses do. But that's just to give you a brief and simple idea of what exactly is happening and what's going on. And again, it's not one-to-one. It's not happening every single time. Just a few examples. But it's just to get an idea and to pretty much conclude, defenses, no matter, think about all the rule changes that have happened over the decades of the NFL that have changed, that have hurt the defense, whether you like it or not. Whether, obviously in the 70s, a defender could literally just throw a wide receiver to the ground and be okay. Now you can't do that. So, and that inherently hurts the defense. Of course, obviously, it's, the NFL in the 70s and 80s was a lot more, archaic compared to the NFL today. But it still technically hurt the defense. But you know what happened every single time rules were put in place to protect a player here, protect a quarterback there? Every single time, defenses adapt. They always figured out how to play around it, and they figured out how to execute and get ahead of the offense once again. And we've seen now, the defense is caught up, and they've surpassed. They're figuring it out now, and there is now a new definitive way to play defense for the most part in the NFL. And what can I say? That's what defense is going to defense. It's what they've always done. It's what they always will be as long as the NFL continues to exist. They're always going to adapt, and they're always going to find the way to get back ahead of the offense. But that is going to do it for me today. Make sure to do whatever YouTuber tells you to do. You know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, share the video. Give it to your friends. Let them watch it. Spread it around. Spread the love. Spread the gospel of the Shumake take and my football analysis, which is okay, I guess, for right now. It's there. It's getting there. But that will do it. And I will see you on Sunday. As you know, the new schedule is out. So Sunday, after the 4 o'clock games, I will be recapping NFL Week 3. And then Wednesday, we'll be talking about Sunday Night Football, Monday Night Football, recapping or previewing Week 4. And it'll be time for Rants 10 on next week, where we might be talking about David Tepper and the Carolina Panthers. We could be, but we'll have to see. But that will do it for me, and I will see you in the next one.